What is up, guys? So here we are for another video in a series I'm doing breaking down yet another subject out of the Microsoft leaked documents from the FTC website debacle. And like I said, it just wouldn't do justice for anybody to try to cram all that information into one video for sensory overload. I'm going to do individual videos breaking down each and every subject for those interested in individual subjects. And today's video is going to circle around Microsoft's dealing in the gaming industry when it comes to purchasing other companies, especially with just how eccentric people have become with monitoring the ABK deal. But we all forgot about the Bethesda deal. That deal sent a shockwave not only through social media and the gaming industry, but also the gaming media themselves lost their minds. Everybody was just like, how is this completely possible? And nobody saw it coming. Well, maybe I did, because I knew Microsoft had a little bit of a close dealing with the owner of Bethesda, who happened to be in their 80s. And I knew that more than likely, if anybody was going to be offered to purchase Bethesda, I knew it was going to be Microsoft, at least from the circles I was listening to at the time. But now with all the documents that are being revealed through the FTC debacle, we're able to take a little bit of a history lesson on what exactly took place in Microsoft buying Bethesda, also what Bethesda was planning before Microsoft purchased them, and now what is happening with Bethesda after Microsoft purchased them, and what's kind of a little bit going on into Bethesda's future overall. So this first internal email that I've kind of pulled out of it all was on July 27th, 2020, where they say, tomorrow we have time with you to discuss the Project Atom, the ZeniMax acquisition. We will spend our time in the Atom financial materials deck, but I have also attached draft board materials for reference as well. And they go on to talk about how they're valuing Bethesda ZeniMax at $10.5 billion. And we all know that Microsoft inevitably ended up purchasing Bethesda for actually $7.5 billion, which means they got a good deal on Bethesda, especially with how they were valuing them. But they were also valuing ZeniMax at more than just a dollar amount. They say the content catalog growth drives net new hours with Game Pass customer service engagement. Hours and subscribers are highly correlated, and therefore growth in hours equals growth in paying subscribers. And the final footnote, ZeniMax is critical to growing a strong overall catalog, driving more hours, converting into paid subscriber growth, which means that there's more than just the dollar sign value. There's the perpetual value of being able to grow Game Pass overall with the acquisition of Bethesda. At the time, though, Bethesda was not the only company on target for Microsoft. In another email, it states, confidently, we have two fairly active merger and acquisitions discussions in gaming right now, Warner Brothers Interactive and ZeniMax. I took the ZeniMax to the board of directors last week, and prior to the board of directors discussion, I asked Amy and Satya if they wanted me to slow either or both of these given the TikTok discussions, because at the time TikTok was coming up for sale because they were supposed to be sold off because they wanted an American company to own TikTok, and potentially Microsoft would have ended up with them. Going back though, given the TikTok discussions, and that they were both empathetically told me no, they are fine with doing all three of these deals if they make sense. I won't say Warner Brothers or Zenny is Nintendo, but both are for sale and gettable by us if things align. The biggest obstacle with Warner Brothers, though, is IP ownership. We wouldn't own any of the IP, which hurts long-term flexibility. And the only obstacle on ZeniMax is valuation expectations of founders. But I think it's likely one or both of these will happen, which will help us continue to double down on our Game Pass relevance. Which obviously, yet again, they are looking at the bigger picture here, and that is Game Pass growth. And we can see that that is definitely benefiting Microsoft in the long run now, especially with the release of Starfield being the biggest title that's been put in Game Pass since. And it's honestly the biggest title that Bethesda has released, and it's not even available on a competing platform outside of PC and Xbox. Now, that's kind of ironic about Starfield, because there's yet another memo in here where they show the 2021 titles Deathloop, Ghostwire Tokyo, PS5 Windows only. They even have something in here known as Project Omen, which turned out to be Redfall because it's referred to as vampires and Spec Ops. But the funny part is Starfield is actually slated for November of 2021 as PS5, Xbox Series X, Windows. And that's where, yes, it was supposed to be on PS5 before the acquisition of Bethesda. Now, obviously, the game did not come out in 2021, and Starfield was inevitably delayed to 2023 just a few weeks ago. And that was a little bit of a letdown for Phil Spencer for all the hype and steam and momentum that he had created for Game Pass. And he kind of wrote a memo to his staff about how this was a letdown for him and that how he really felt that this shouldn't happen again. With the news that Starfield is going to miss holiday, still not a ton of clarity on the launch date of Redfall and Stalker 2 development is so impacted by the war in Ukraine. I feel we are in a huge hole with our games lineup for both platform marketing differentiation and our Game Pass content. We keep talking about a big AAA a quarter in the service, and it feels we are likely to go through a gap of almost 16 months between big exclusive launches on our platform, Halo Infinite being our last on December 8th, 2021. This is really a disaster situation for us given all we've invested in content across studios at our Game Pass content fund. We need to learn from this and build a plan forward. And with this email, he continues to go on about how they really need to learn how to set dates right and manage expectations properly and really give fans what they deserve in the Game Pass subscription service. Now, this is only from a first-party studio offerings perspective. Yes, there's always something to play in Game Pass from a third-party perspective, but Phil Spencer was concentrating every ounce of this email on the first-party studio offerings from Microsoft in the Game Pass subscription service. Now, if you really look at Starfield, before the acquisition, Starfield was slated to make $900 million in revenue from its release in 2021 until it is finally just a few years later in 2024. So they're expecting the game to make over $900 million over 4 years. Now, with the game coming out in 2023, that is obviously probably going to be projected all the way to 2027 at this point, and it looks like it could potentially be well on course to make that kind of revenue, especially with the fact that the game has already seen over 10 million players in its first month in being offered on the market. Now, Redfall was not the only game to be thought of before the Bethesda purchase, and it wasn't the only game to be delayed as well outside of the Bethesda purchase. There's a chart here showing that starting in fiscal year 2020, we were supposed to have obviously Doom Eternal and some DLC with the Elder Scrolls Online Greymoor, Fallout Wastelanders, and Deathloop. And in 2021, we were supposed to see Starfield, Redfall, another Doom Eternal DLC, Ghostwire Tokyo. And we did see those games take place, but a couple of them, especially Redfall, didn't come out until this year. So this chart is already 2 years out of date. But going into what they had labeled as fiscal year 2020, you start seeing Indiana Jones game, Oblivion Remaster, yet another Elder Scrolls Online expansion, and some Starfield DLC, which points that not only next year are we going to see some Starfield DLC, which I did a video on what could potentially be there, check that one out, but also we can see Indiana Jones possibly more than likely around holiday season 2024, along with an Oblivion remaster taking place as well, hopefully next year. And it looks like the stars might align, and this is a good possibility of happening. And then in their chart also on what they are calling fiscal year 2023, which is now probably going to be 2025, we see something called Doom Year Zero and DLC. Really hyped for that. Really hoping that maybe more than likely it is a prequel to the Doom games that were done not too recently. And then now we also see something called Project Kestrel, an Elder Scrolls Online expansion again, and something they're referring to as Project Platinum, which has got some people kind of excited and some rumors are abounding about Project Platinum. Is this referring to Platinum Games and possibly the resurgence of Scalebound because they have handed that IP off to somebody else that they trust even more? And that definitely a lot of room for speculation on Project Platinum, but also on Project Kestrel. And that brings us to what they're referring to as fiscal year 2024, which is probably now 2026. We have the Elder Scrolls 6 popping up, and now they're saying Project Kestrel expansion. Now, notice through this whole list, the only time they've said expansion is around Elder Scrolls Online, which happens to be an online MMO, which is honestly a fun game. I play it all the time, which means that probably more than likely Project Kestrel is another MMO. And we know for a while now that ZeniMax has been ramping up production on a new IP, and they've also been expanding their studios. I think they just recently got one in Budapest that I did a video on to help bolster the demand that they need to keep Elder Scrolls Online up to date, and also to start working on a new behind-the-scenes IP. Now, that IP, from some of the rumors I'm hearing, could potentially be something to revolve around the Star Wars universe and the Mandalorian. I don't have any documentation for that part of it. I've heard people talk about it like Destin Legary over at IGN, but there is some strong rumors that there is a licensed IP around the Star Wars universe and the Mandalorian taking place over at Bethesda, but it doesn't end there. There's also on this list something called another licensed IP game. So they are working on yet another licensed IP, but because it's not looking like that one will be an MMO, it looks like it's going to be a single player based game or something a little bit smaller in scale and not an MMO. But they're also going to have yet another remaster with Fallout 3 and another Elder Scrolls Online expansion with also a sequel to Ghostwire Tokyo, and Dishonored 3 also coming out. So there's already a number of sequels taking place by 2026, it seems, from the math that I'm coming up with. And there's also more DLC that is supposed to come out for this Doom Year Zero. So it looks like that Bethesda alone has enough games lined up to overshadow even Microsoft's competition's offering from their first-party studios. And that's where Microsoft definitely scored a big win with Bethesda. They even said in some of their emails that ZeniMax themselves is bigger than all of Microsoft's first-party studios over at Xbox combined, and that ZeniMax was going to double their offerings. And this is a big yes to the evidence that proves that Microsoft was totally right in thinking that Bethesda was going to be a good purchase. Now, the last tidbit of information I was able to mine out of all this when it comes to Bethesda games is Elder Scrolls 6. Everybody has wanted to know, is this game going to be exclusive to the Xbox ecosystem? Phil Spencer even danced around this question when the FTC asked him at the whole FTC trial on trying to buy Activision Blizzard. And he even said, well, I don't know. It's a big IP. We haven't decided yet. But it appears that Microsoft has decided. There's this little chart here where it shows that the Elder Scrolls 6 is only going to be available on Xbox and PC. And there's this little footnote here. In order to be on Xbox, I want us to be able to bring the full, complete package of what we have, and I know that would be true when I think about Elder Scrolls 6. So he knows that Elder Scrolls 6 is going to be yet another big game for Bethesda and Xbox. It's going to be yet another Starfield. And by the success of Starfield having over 10 million players already in its launch month, we can honestly say that Microsoft feels very confident that Elder Scrolls 6 will be able to stand on its own 2 feet alone without having to be offered on other platforms outside of the Xbox ecosystem, which is console and PC. So guys, when I sit back and look at this information, I already start kind of salivating at the mouth, clamoring at the hands, ready to get my hands on some of these IPs, especially a Fallout 3 remaster, and Indiana Jones. I mean, that would be absolutely amazing. I'm a huge Indiana Jones fan, and it would be amazing to see him immortalized in today's gaming world. And honestly, now that Harrison Ford is no longer doing the character, it would be great to see the character continue on his legacy in the gaming world. But tell me, what gets exciting for you with all the names I rattled off? Are you ready to start playing some of these games? What do you hope to see come out of all of the stuff that I just rattled off? Please tell me down in the comments section below. And please, as always, if you enjoyed today's content, like, subscribe, all that fun stuff that YouTube likes to see to help me grow. Speaking of helping me grow, obviously, I'm not putting any of this information up on the screen for you to see. Why? Because I'm going to be absolutely honest. I'm too small of a channel to feel confident that I will not be kind of struck down for showing documents that literally have evidence stamps on them. I'm not going to show court documents that are technically got disclaimers on them, and I'm not going to get in trouble for that. I am going to just sit here and read from the screen, and you know from all the leaks that this stuff is true. But please, if you want to help me kind of get around all that, help me grow. Like and subscribe down below. I'm not going to sit here and pander any more than that. Please also check out the end card on this video. Watch my latest video. Explore my channel. Check out the other videos from the series that I'm crafting around all these document leaks. And as always, please remember, everybody, play the games you prefer on the platform that you love. And remember that the console wars are just dogma. I am Centurion 1307, and thank you for watching.